Now. All right, so hello again, everyone. This is Leslie Brill, president of Bronx River Sound Shore Audubon, and we're delighted to have with us tonight Suzie Gilbert to talk about the nuts and bolts of wildlife rehab. Um, some of you may have seen her presentation at Eagle Fest in February, and after that presentation, my daughter and I both read Suzie's book, memoir, Fly Away: How a Wild Bird Rehabber Sought Adventure and Found Her Wings, and we just loved this book. It certainly got me through a rough patch earlier this year. I also read her wonderful novel Unflappable, which I think should be made into a movie. um, so a bit about Suzie. Suzie Gilbert was a wild bird rehabilitator for 30 years. She worked for the Hudson Valley Raptor Center for 11 years before opening Flyaway Inc., her own all-species bird rehab center out of her home. She's the author of the children's book Hawk Hill from Chronicle Books, her bird rehabbing memoir Fly Away, which I just showed you, and the comic suspenseful wildlife thriller Unflappable from Perch Press. Fly Away was published by HarperCollins, by the way, and Unflappable was one of Audubon Magazine's 3 best summer reads of 2020. She has written numerous environmental columns and articles and was the wildlife rehab blogger for the birding website 10,000 Birds, which is an excellent, well-known birding website. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Suzie. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been wonderful working with you, and I'm so glad you have managed to solve all the Zoom problems that we have had.
Thank
If
you.
this is your first try, you're doing really, really well.
Thanks so much.
Oh, no problem. So I am going to put myself into the corner here and put my slideshow on, and I'm going to do it quickly. So I hope there. Okay. So uh, from what I see, this is I can see my slides, and am I, Leslie, am I up in the
I
corner the
don't
way
I
I
don't
should?
I don't see your slides yet. Did you hit the screen share button?
Oh, um, okay. Sorry, this is technical difficulty number 101. Share screen.
No worries, take your
Okay.
time. We just tried it out, so it should still work, but
Which,
if you need to scream for help. Oh, here we go. There we go.
there.
Beautiful.
Has
Perfect.
okay. All right. Well, uh, thank you for the introduction, and much less work for me. Um, here are here are my books. Hawk Hill, the children's book. Fly Away is my memoir. Unflappable is my novel. I'm seeing if I can uh, shift the screen over a little bit because um, I can see a bar on the right side. But Leslie, can you see that?
I do. You know what? Let me see if I can close out of that.
Maybe just
You can X out of that participants bar, which I should have done for the recording too. But if you're not able to, don't worry about it. I don't see that. If anyone wants to close out of that, they can. And what's being recorded doesn't show that bar. So you're all good from this end.
okay. Okay,
It,
good. Then I'll
it
just
looks very good.
okay, good. All right. So I'm addressing Audubon people. So some of the information I'm going to be giving you is going to be old hat. You will know this stuff. But my goal here is really to introduce you to the world of wildlife rehabbers and show you what we go through, on a daily basis. And so some of it will be new and some not. But uh, so this is the public perception of wildlife rehabbers. Uh-oh. I am not I am not uh going forward. Ah, I think my tech help has arrived. I should be able to push this and have it
Yeah.
keep going. Ah, there we go. What did you
Just click.
just click? Okay. All right. Now we're good. Thank you. Here's the public perception of wildlife rehabbers. And we know this is a misperception because one, this woman is wearing a dress, which would never happen. Two, it's clean, which would also never happen. It looks like she has washed her hair, which usually doesn't happen too often. And all these animals are healthy and happy and getting along, and there are no predators. So we can tell this is Disney. This is reality. Um, Rehabbers are really like EMTs. Uh, we take all different species. We are not veterinarians. Okay, we work with veterinarians. There are some veterinarians who are also rehabbers, but not all that many. If you work at a big, well-funded wildlife rehab place, sometimes there will even be a veterinarian on staff. And that is just, mecca for rehabbers. There are vet techs who work there. You have your own x-ray machines. But for single rehabbers, working by themselves or for smaller rehab places, we have to work with veterinarians, which means we have to find the ones who are willing to work with us. Not everybody does. The majority of veterinarians, they don't want to hear about wildlife. They have enough on their hands with regular pets. So when we find a vet who is willing to work with us, you see that halo there? That is for real. We love them and they are saints. They, when I was rehabbing full time, I had several veterinarians I worked with. They taught me so much. If I had a badly injured bird, they would squeeze the bird in no matter how much they were booked. And they were just, I don't know what I would have done without them. So shout out to all the veterinarians who help rehabbers. We aren't veterinarians, but we need to be licensed. So if you want to do small mammals, uh, reptiles, amphibians, uh, non-native birds, you are licensed by the state. That's DEC in New York. It's a 2-hour test. You have to get 80% or better. You have to have worked with a wildlife rehabber, and you will get a license from the state. If you want to work with migratory birds, that's a whole different ballgame. Migratory birds, they make you jump through hoops, like serious hoops. There are so many things you have to do, which is good because it is difficult to rehab birds. And sometimes we get in threatened or endangered species, and they want to make sure that the people who are taking care of these birds know what they're doing. If you want to do rabies vector species, like raccoons, like bats, you need another whole license. If you want to do large mammals, like bears, like coyotes, you need another whole license. One of the Murphy's laws of wildlife rehab is whatever you state you do, whatever species you state you do, it doesn't matter. People will bring you the other species. For instance, I had a man call me on the phone once and I said, hello. And he said, are you the bird woman? And I said, yes. And he said, I'll be right over. And then he hung up. And half an hour later, there was a knock on my door. And guy comes in, he hands me a box. I look in the box and it's a bat. And I said, I would love to help you, but I don't do bats. I don't have the license for bats. And he got really angry and he said, it's got wings, don't it? And yes, it did. It did have wings. So I took it. I took the bat in, and then I transferred him to a bat rehabber, which is another thing we do. Likewise, I had once a very nice couple drive up my driveway, and in the back of their car, not in the back seat, but in the way back, was an unconscious coyote. And I didn't do coyotes any more than I did bats, but I did coyotes more than they did. So I I didn't want to leave them alone with the coyote. So I helped them get it out of the car and into a crate, still unconscious, thank goodness. And I transferred the coyote to a coyote rehabber. So um, we give them, once the bird, I'll say birds, once the bird is stabilized, if there are injuries that we can do, we can take care of it ourselves. If the bird needs a veterinarian, if they're broken bones, if he needs surgery, if he needs a an array of medication, we take him to the vet. But then we give them a place to heal. Stress can kill wildlife just as effectively as disease or injury. They can stress out so fast, and you just need to make sure they're comfortable and then leave them alone. Um, Upper left, that's a phoebe in a reptarium. Reptariums are made for reptiles, but they're perfect for birds. The frame is very lightweight, and then it's mesh. And the mesh is vital because you don't want the birds rubbing their feathers against anything and fraying them, because then they won't be releasable. Upper right, this is an enclosure that my father actually built for me, and it was a lifesaver. It was wonderful because uh, sometimes with the bigger birds, you you have them stabilized, they're eating, they're in an enclosure, but you've got to clean every day, and you don't want to pick them up, or at least I don't. Um, it's it stresses them, one, or if you pick them up too much, they can get used to being handled, and you don't want that either. So this double doored enclosure was fabulous because I could open one door, the bird would go to the other side, and then I'd clean, then I'd close the door, and I'd reverse the process, and I'd never have to touch the bird. Certain birds, this wasn't a good idea, like great horned owls, who were really homicidal. They would go to the other side and then just get a running, they'd have a runway to come at me. So in retrospect, a divider would have been a little better, but I didn't have that then. Lower left-hand side, this is the Gray Snow Eagle House in Perkins, Oklahoma. And if any of you are anywhere near Tulsa, this is on the outskirts of Tulsa, Oklahoma. It is the most amazing place. That is a flight cage, and these eagles just fly in this flight cage. They have a beautiful setup. It's run by the Iowa tribe, and it's just an awe-inspiring place. So I would urge you to go if you're near it. Lower right, I just included this because I thought maybe some of you would wonder, where do you stash a bear if the bear is recovering from being hit by a car or whatever else befalls bears? And the answer is this great big half a drain pipe. I have friends who do bears, and that's all I know. I don't do bears. I just thought this would be interesting. Let's see. So, hmm. Um, I think, hang on one second. No, I don't have that. All right. One thing before I get into causes of mortality for injury and mortality for birds, um, we are we are all connected. All the rehabbers, like we all share stories of birds and treatments and injuries, and that helps us. And so I can show you lots of examples of birds that I haven't done myself because I'm connected to all these bird rehabbers everywhere. Most common causes of these injuries, I can go through this fast because I'm sure you're all familiar with it. There are a couple that are unusual. Outdoor cats, you know, don't get me started. Uh, Windows, bird collisions. We get a lot of these, and it's hard to say. Sometimes kills them outright. Sometimes they fly away. Sometimes they have an embolism. We keep them for a week. They seem like they're ready to go, and then we lose them. It's always hard to say. Cutting down the trees in the springtime, not such a good idea. Hit by car, we get a lot of hit by cars. Poisons. Poisons. There's an organization in California called RATS. It's Raptors Are the Solution. And they have done an amazing job of legislating against all kinds of poisons, but especially escars, the second generation anticoagulants, which are sold over the counter. And they're really terrible for predators, especially birds of prey who are poisoned. We get in secondary poisoning of raptors all the time. And this group, RATS in California, just now it's illegal to send. They had a moratorium for a while. Now it's illegal in California to sell these, and it would be wonderful if New York would follow suit. Pesticides, going clockwise, utility poles. Utility poles, interestingly enough, are one of those things where you think the problem is so big that there's nothing you can do about it. But actually, there is. You can have an effect, and it's a perfect example of uh, um, addressing the problem in your own backyard, and then maybe having a wider effect. These poles, a bird can land on them 100 times, and then on the 101st, they stand on a transformer, they brush their wing on the jumper wire, and that's it. But if you have any kind of proof that this is either a real hazard or it has killed birds, you can call Fish and Wildlife, you can call the power company. I have a friend in state of Washington, and she watched she watched these golden eagles as nestlings, and then they became fledglings and they started flying around. And one morning she looked out and she saw one of the nestlings uh, standing on a pole surrounded by wires. And she took a picture and she mailed it to US Fish and Wildlife and state of Washington Fish and Wildlife. And following morning, the electric company was there knocking at her door and asking about the poles. And within the next 2 weeks, they had retrofitted 22 of these poles. So you really can have an effect. And it's not a big fix. It's up to them how hard they want to work, but a T-bar, that's all it takes because the bird will land on the highest part. Uh, Glue traps, of course, are terrible things. Uh, some of the less usual ones. This little screech owl was perched on a beam in a house that was being constructed. There was a crew in there, and they were using this foam insulation that comes out of the gun. And they didn't see this little guy perching on one of the beams. And somebody knocked him down with one of these guns. And the foreman, luckily, was a wonderful guy. And he was so upset. And he found a rehabber and he brought the owl to the rehabber immediately.
Wow.
Um, there is a solvent that can take any kind of gunk off bird feathers now. There's something new. But back in the day when I was doing this full time, the best solvent to get any kind of yucky stuff off bird feathers was the cream filling for Hostess Twinkies. And it's because they're filled with polysorbate 60. And there was a chemist somewhere, this is the lore, there was a chemist whose dog stepped in something awful and he couldn't get it off the dog's foot. And he thought, I need polysorbate 60 to do it. And then later he realized that that's in Hostess Twinkies. And so this got on the rehabber grapevine, and everybody stockpiled this stuff because you could just break it open and smear it around and the stuff would come off. Then Hostess decided to discontinue them and we were all frantic, but at least now there's another product you can use. Here's another unusual one. This heron was fishing, great blue heron minding his own business, fishing for fish. And this silver beer can looked like a fish glinting in the sun. So he stabbed it and then he couldn't get the beer can off his beak. There must have been 24 people trying to catch this bird and nobody could do it because there was nothing wrong with his wings. So eventually, 3 days later, people had to just wait for 3 days until he was so hungry that he couldn't fly. And then they ran him down, caught him, got the can off, and fed him up before they let him go again. But it's all, education, things like this you don't think of as having an effect, but they do. Here's what I was talking about before. Rehabbers all being connected. I started when I was a single rehabber. I was really isolated. I started off with raptors, then I was just going to do songbirds, and just by popular demand, I ended up taking in all these different kinds of birds that I was not trained to take in. And I was the only person around. People would call me and say, I've called 12 people and nobody will pick up. Please take this bird. So I'd say, okay. I started a Facebook group and it was rehabbers all across the country. And the beauty was, besides the solidarity that we could share, the beauty was we could share information. So, I'd get online. The first time I took in a great blue heron, I had no idea what to do with this bird. And I got online and I said, help me, what do I do? There's nobody around who can take this bird. And I immediately got an answer. The first thing someone wrote was, go get your ski goggles because they will try and stab you in the eyeball, which they will. So after that, that's the first thing you do. The second thing you do is call Avian Haven in Maine or Tri-State Bird Rescue in Delaware because they are the go-to people for water birds on the East Coast. And so just having this kind of network makes a huge difference for rehabbers. And also, it will allow me to tell you stories of bird rescues that don't happen just to me. It can be anywhere in the country. How do we get the wildlife? What we want is lower right. This beautiful box, this is exactly what we want, a cardboard box. There's a towel on the bottom so the bird can grip, air holes so the bird can breathe, and some lovely artwork on the outside of it. This box was delivered to Happy Nest Rehab Center in Tennessee with a kestrel. Lower left, this is another perfect box. It's actually a pet carrier. It has little holes in it. This was a beautiful adult Baltimore Oriole who was delivered to me, minus his tail feathers because of an outdoor cat who, after I had a little chat with the owner, became an indoor cat. The upper left, a really nice man brought me this box and he said, I'm so glad that I found a bird expert. Can you tell me what this is? I said, I don't know. At that point, I wasn't doing water birds. So I took a picture of it and I sent it to my Audubon friends. This is how I got through a lot of these birds that I had never cared for, I had never taken care of. And sometimes I couldn't even ID them. I would send photos to my Audubon friends and they would ID them for me. So, to all you Audubon people, I'm really grateful still. Okay, there's a rehabber in Arizona who she's sitting in her house one day and an entire biker gang appeared in her driveway, which kind of freaked her out, except one of them had a saddlebag, and in the saddlebag was a juvenile red-tailed hawk. He had been all wrapped up in fishing line, and you know, they rescued him. A couple of them had holes in their arms because the bird was not completely tied up. But they brought him over. They were determined to get him some help. And, she said, the rehabber said that these big, scary looking bearded bikers, some of them had tears in their eyes when she said, he's fine. I'll just get him out of the fishing line and feed him up and release him. Oops. Okay, Hawaii. I have a friend, Tracy, in Hawaii. She was riding out a hurricane, and there was a knock on her front door. And there was a man standing there wearing a boot on one foot, holding the other boot in his hand. And in the boot was a wedge-tailed shearwater chick. And she said, "You want to come in and get dry?" And he said, "Nope, just give me back my boot." And off he went, left her the chick. Hmm. This is my friend in Wisconsin, Marge. Marge had a young yellow-billed cuckoo delivered in a glass of water by a lawyer. No idea why, but there you have it. Linda in Connecticut is the go-to bat rehabber. Oh. She said there was a little brown bat delivered to her by a very nice woman who gave her the bat in a nice box. And then she handed her a SpongeBob SquarePants pineapple house. And she said, "What's this for?" And the woman said, "That's where he sleeps." So she took the bat, she put him in a reptarium, or so that, an enclosure for the bat. And she stuck in the pineapple house thinking, why not? And she came back an hour later and he was upside down sleeping in the pineapple house. She said, sometimes you just have to trust the finder. Huh. If you're in Southern California, come across an injured pelican, what else do you put him in? A cooler. This one got the biggest awe from the rehabbers. This is a little tiny opossum delivered in a box surrounded by a mink collar with greenery and pine cones. It was a white box with a big red ribbon, lots of hearts on it. We love deliveries like that. Sometimes sometimes people bring us deliveries and they don't even have a container. Here in Florida, this young broadwing hawk thought he would make a meal out of this rat snake, and the rat snake didn't go for it. So the man said he tried to figure out how to get them apart, and he just couldn't figure it out. So he put on a big pair of work gloves. He picked both of them up and put them on his passenger seat of his truck and drove them to Key West Wildlife Center, dropped them off. The rehabbers there pulled them apart, separated them. Neither one was injured. They were both just really hungry. So both were eventually released. And on it went. House sparrow in a Happy Meal container, anywhere. Everybody has gotten these. Which brings us to invasives. every rehabber has to decide for themselves whether or not they're going to take invasives. Um, there are some rehabbers who will take anything that comes in the door. Uh, there are others, especially those who put up and monitor bluebird boxes. They don't want to hear about house sparrows, so they will not take them. Uh, it's up to the rehabber. This was my one example of an invasive. This young starling was delivered to me, and he was imprinted. The woman had had him alone for a few weeks. And, they're smart, they're personable. He played Pokemon with my kids. It was, he hung out under the light bulb, sunning himself. I mean, he was in his way a very cool bird. And what could I do with him? I kept him for a few weeks until I found him a home with another rehabber who had a, a few starlings that were unreleasable. And that's where it went. We get a lot of mistaken identities. This was from a rehabber in Texas. The woman said, called a rehabber and said, "You've got to get this skunk out of my yard fast." It was the neighbor's guinea pig.
Wait.
The rehabber said, "We all know skunks don't grow their tails until age 5."
Huh.
This was a friend in Connecticut. The caller said it's a bald eagle. She's on her way out the door and she said, "I know this is not a bald eagle. I don't know what it is, but I know it's not." But she went anyway. It was a white crested black Polish bantam that belonged to the neighbor.
Hmm.
We get a lot of calls for owls and ducks. And the people say, "This bird has not moved in 48 hours or 24 hours. I have been watching him and he has not moved." And a lot of times it's because he's plastic. If you bring up plastic birds with rehabbers, you'll get a lot of stories. So this goes along with education. You would think by now with the internet, people would know you don't give birds food or water, but there are lots of sites. There are lots of sites that give you bad information. It's amazing to me that people still think you can give baby birds bread and milk. It sort of boggles my mind, but they still do. I had one person ask me, she said, "Wait, but don't cowbirds milk cows?" And I said, "Oh, no, but this is such a big part of our job, rehabber jobs. People don't know, they're not educated. If they care enough to bring you the bird to try and get it help, if they care enough for that, then you can educate them and then they will pass it on. So, as often as we get fed up and tired, it's people are open to hearing information like this. We've had all kinds of whoppers. I mean, T-Town, I'm sure you know T-Town in Ossining. Two turtles delivered to T-Town. They were being fed spaghetti and meatballs because, well, the noodles kind of look like worms. There was a groundhog being fed pepperoni pizza because that's what they fed the dog. Thought it was logical. Another rehabber friend had a cottontail delivered, and the people went out of their way to deliver him along with the food they thought he ate, which was 2 pounds of hamburger meat. So they actually, they laughed when she said they don't actually eat hamburger meat, but they went away with much more information than they came in with.
Hmm.
We have a lot of these. There was a Mississippi kite delivered standing on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and they had cut the crust off for him. They tried. The head scratcher was one of the head scratchers was a flying squirrel. This was a Heber. I think she was in Delaware. We're trying to remember where she was from.
Hmm.
She did flying squirrels. I don't know if any of you are familiar with flying squirrels. During the best of times, they are not what you would call peaceful animals. They're like little crackheads. They're just crazy. And the people had been feeding this little flying squirrel chocolate covered espresso beans for 2 days. She said the squirrel was like this. And then he slept for 2 days. This last one, this downy woodpecker, is one of my favorites. A man delivered him to me, along with a bag of wood chips that he had picked up at the store as his food. And he said, well, that's what they're doing up there, isn't it? And I said, no, they're looking for bugs. But I mean, how nice of him to try and feed this bird. Um, so, you know, strange alliances are made in rehab.
Hmm.
That goes for animals as well. Uh,
Hmm.
I had this swan in broken wing.
Hmm.
I hadn't taken in many swans, but you can see I was scrambling. I was putting together a swan enclosure with baby doors and outdoor furniture. And the swan was perfectly happy to sit there. I had released 4 crows 2 weeks before. Um, excuse me. You never, you never want to raise a single crow, of course. They imprint in a heartbeat. But there were 4 of them. They were they were wild. They wouldn't let anyone touch them, but they hung around because I did what is called a soft release. And that means they know how to find their own food, but once a day I put some out just to supplement them. So they were sort of hanging around the house. This one crow spotted the swan and flew down, and then the 2 of them just hung out together. They just every day they would be there hanging out. I don't know why. I have no idea why. I thought maybe they were talking about me, but who knows? Uh, Here's a story from
Hmm.
this is from Philadelphia Metro Wildlife Center. It's kind of a sad story because these birds could have grown up on their own, but it's a good story and it's a good educational story. Uh, this a hired man was taking down a tree in the springtime. Shouldn't have been, but he was sectioning the tree and he heard a peeping sound. I don't know. He must have turned his chainsaw off for a while, but he heard the peeping sound. He saw the hole. He called the wildlife center. They said, bring in the whole section. Don't touch it, just bring it in. The hole was too small for the man to put his hand in. So we brought the whole section in and they drilled very carefully around enough so that one of the rehabbers could get her hand in there. Excuse me. And she pulled out 4 nestling red-bellied woodpeckers. And on the way in, they had realized that there was a second hole around the other side of this section of wood. And so they turned around and drilled the second hole, and out came this nestling screech owl. So this same section of wood with 2 holes and 2 very different avian families.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm sure you all know disturbing an active nest
Hmm.
is a violation of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So if you know that somebody is preparing to or in the process of taking down a nest, taking down a tree that contains a nest, you can call this tip line. It's a Fish and Wildlife tip line and tell them what's happening, and they will come.
Hmm.
Mange, we get this mange. These two pictures came from Cold Spring. The first one was a fox in the village. You can see this is February. He's got no hair in the back there.
Mm.
Um, the coyote on the right was a young coyote in the hills of Cold Spring. Um, the first in the village, it's packed. It's almost urban living. Uh, Someone was feeding this fox, and they'd feed him every day because they felt so bad for him. This coyote
Mm.
was a woman who saw how bad off he was, and she was feeding him as well. Just one meal a day. She'd put out some food for him at 5 o'clock, and way off in the distance, she'd see him. Um, we don't encourage people to feed wildlife. It's not a good idea. Usually it doesn't end well for the wildlife normally. But in a case like this, it's kind of hard to tell people don't do that. But there is a solution for this, and it's called Bravecto. It's a drug. Um, it's one-stop shopping. If you can get a dose of Bravecto into a fox or a coyote like this, one dose, you see him swallow it. In a couple of months, he will look like that. That'll be the difference. See,
Really?
this coyote looks like he's smiling. I swear it's not a Photoshop. I swear, because I know the woman who took this and she does not know how to. He just looks like that, probably because he's got his hair back. But this is the difference. This is a couple months worth,
Hmm.
and it works. The thing is, Bravecto, it's a drug. You need to get it through a veterinarian, so you need to work with a wildlife rehabber. And this dose, you need to make sure that they eat it. You have to see them eat it. And if they don't eat it, you're going to want to rush out and grab the pill back and then try again the next day, because these things they cost $62 a pop. So you don't want to just throw them out there. Anyway, you can help
Hmm.
in a situation like this. It's a bad way for a poor fox or a coyote to go. So,
Hmm.
public awareness. As you can see, so much of what we do is telling people how to work or live
Hmm.
with animals. How to do it.
Hmm.
If anybody needs flyers, any kind of public awareness handouts like this, if you need it, you know, uh, contact me through my website and I can get them for you. We've got a whole bunch of these, and they're really effective. Like this one with the ducks. If you put that up the local pond where everybody's feeding geese and ducks bread, you put up a sign like this, and people will learn it's not good. You're not helping them.
Hmm.
And here are the foods that would be better for them if it's a hard winter.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
we our
Hmm.
we want let the wild be wild. That's our motto. We let wildlife be wildlife.
Hmm.
I do a lot of um, book
Hmm.
events. I do book signings. I go to libraries and I talk about my books. And inevitably, somebody will come up to me and say, you're so lucky. You're so lucky because you get to hug baby owls. I've always wanted to hug a baby owl. And I say, no, you really don't. That's what I think of when I think of a baby owl. That's a little great horn, and that's how much they want to hug us back. Um, Great horns, I think of great horned owls as the Hannibal Lecters of the bird world. They just always seem to be gunning for me when I had them in. They were amazing birds. I had so much respect for them. But uh, every time I'd have one in, I was on high alert. I was on real high alert. And then, I'd get them out and then I'd get in something like a little screech owl. And this is a thing among rehabbers. You get in a big owl and then you get in a screech owl, and inevitably you say, oh, they're so cute, and you do something stupid like handle them with no gloves. And you forget that they are little demon birds. They are. So um, every every bird is different. Every bird we come into contact with is different. They all have different personalities. Um,
Mm,
this bird, I just want to tell you one last particular story of an amazing bird who came in. Sorry about the quality of this photograph. I couldn't find my photograph, and I had this blown up, and a friend sent it. It's kind of shiny. But this is an old red tail. This story happened in just a little before Thanksgiving of 2010. Um, I got a call from someone who had found a red tail in the middle of the road, sitting on a dead rabbit. And he slowed down, expecting her to fly away, and she didn't. And so he stopped his truck, he got out, and still expected her to fly away. He was going to drag the rabbit to the side of the road so she could have it, and she wouldn't move. So he eventually picked them both up because she wouldn't let go. It was like the snake and the broadwing. But he picked them up, he put her in his truck, and then brought her over to me. Um, I examined her, and she had a number of issues. Um, she was very, very skinny. She had a nasty rasp in her chest. I thought she had a respiratory infection. I thought it might be aspergillosis, which is a fungal infection that's really hard to treat. One of her feet was swollen, so I thought that might be bumblefoot, which is another fungal infection, very hard to treat. And she was clearly an old bird. I mean, we don't see a lot of old birds, but I mean, if you look at the picture, you can see above her eyes. I mean, it looks like she's sort of grizzled. Anyway, um, I took her in, I fed her, I got her warm, and then she was banded. So while she was,
mm,
chilling out in her hospital cage, I had called the vet because I wanted to bring her to a vet right away. Um, I called the bird banding lab in Washington, and he said, "All right, hang on," put me on hold. Then he came back and said he was really excited. And he said that this bird had been banded in 1983, which made her at 27 years and 9 months the second oldest red tail ever recovered live in North America.
mm,
So she was this really amazing old bird. And one, I was thrilled. I mean, she was like a celebrity bird. On the other hand, I was petrified because she had these really terrible fungal infections and she was a million years old. I mean, I wanted to take her to the Mayo Clinic. I called the Raptor Trust. Um, Raptor Trust, I'm sure many of you know the Raptor Trust. It's in Millington, New Jersey. They are a really wonderful, big, well-funded
mm,
rehab operation. They have a part-time vet on staff. They have vet technicians. And I told them her story, and they said, yes, bring her right down. Definitely bring her down. So I drove her there.
mm,
It turns out as I was driving, I mean, I've known the people at the Raptor Trust for years, and Len Susie used to be he started the Raptor Trust. He has since passed away, but at that point he was the founder and he ran the place. And he was interested. My friend Kathy had told him this old red tail was coming. So he said, "Let me look in my records." And he looked up in his records, and it turns out that one of his own apprentices had banded this bird in 1983 when she was a fledgling. And it turns out, coincidentally, that was the year that he and his wife had started the Raptor Trust. So
mm.
she was, she was a celebrity. She got the best of care. Everyone was doting on her, making sure that she was okay. Uh,
Mm.
she made a full recovery, and they kept her through the winter, and they were going to release her in the spring when she was 28 years old. So this is when
mm,
a big, this big rift
mm,
developed in a very tight-knit organization because part of the people at Raptor Trust wanted to release her. They said she's 28 years old. She's lived her entire life as a free bird. If there, why can't she live the rest of her life as a free bird?
mm,
The other faction at the Raptor Trust said she's 28 years old. There's no way she's going to live through another winter. If she has lived for this long, why should she meet her end, struggling or starving? Why don't we take care of her? And they went back and forth. And finally, they decided that they were going to release her. So that spring, they called me up and asked, I gave them directions to the town where she had come from, found a field where we could release her. We all met and we released her together.
mm,
Before she was released, she had been flying around her flight cage really strongly. Strong bird. She looked fit and ready to go. Um, when when she was released, though, she they tossed her into the air and she gave a few good wing beats and then lost altitude. As she was going across the field, she went lower and lower, and finally she landed and she just stood there. So they retrieved her, took her back, let her go again, and the same thing happened.
mm,
So, in the end, she kind of made the decision herself. They took her back to Raptor Trust. They put her in a big flight cage. This is in the spring. In the fall, no, not in the fall, in the end of the summer. She had spent the summer in this flight cage. And the end of the summer, raptor people start getting starving raptors in. These are first year birds who have not learned to hunt well enough. 80% of raptors don't make it out of their first year.
mm,
So the Raptor Trust took in several young starving red tails. Once they got them stabilized, they put them in the flight with this old bird, the old red tail. And they would go out to feed them, and there would be this old red tail on a high perch surrounded by all these young ones.
mm,
Do live prey training there so that they have a sandbox and they release live rats and mice. And she taught these young birds how to hunt better than they had hunted before. So at the end of the
mm.
beginning of the fall, when these young ones were up and hunting better, they released them. And the old red tail spent the winter just dozing in the sun. And then the following spring, a few orphans came in. There were orphaned nestling red tails, and they put them in a makeshift nest and put them in the flight cage with this old bird. They were calling the queen now. Put the young ones in with the queen, and she adopted them, and she fed them, and they grew up and went through live prey training. She taught them how to hunt, and the next batch they were released in the fall, and then she went back to hanging out in the sun. And this went on for another couple of years, and then she died. But she had this amazing life. And I had some media contacts. She ended up profiled in the New York Times twice. I had a bunch of nice donations thanks to her. And Raptor Trust had a bunch of nice donations thanks to her.
mm.
I mean, she was a remarkable bird. And it was just, it was very cool to be a part of that story. So that's the end of my bird stories. But I want to give you this information in case you don't know this organization. This is such a wonderful website. If you don't have it, write this down. It's ahnow.org, animal help now. If you have injured wildlife,
mm,
or if someone calls you and says, help, I've got an injured fill in the blank, you get on the website, you type in the address, and up will pop the names of all the rehabbers
mm,
in that area and what kinds of animals they do. It works all over the country, which is so great. I mean, I used to get phone calls from people and they would be so upset. There'd be some animal in distress and please, please help me. And I'd say, yes, yes, just tell me where you are. And they'd say, San Diego. So it's so great to have this
mm,
this site.
mm,
These are rehabbers. We as you can imagine, rehabbers get stressed out. We are
mm,
overworked, underfunded, underslept, stressed out. The phone just never stops ringing.
mm,
So sometimes rehabbers get this reputation as being really crabby, really nasty. And, sometimes, sometimes we are that way. Sometimes it's over the top,
mm.
but not all the time. Rehabbers do the best they can. Sometimes we're really jolly. Sometimes we're happy. How can you not be happy when you have a bird like this? Um, Releasing
mm.
animals, birds, whatever you have, it really does make our heart sing. It really does make what we do worth doing it. Seeing these animals that have struggled so hard, seeing them go back to where they should be. So, one last thing I want to leave you with is
Mm, mm,
uh, in 2022, in case you're interested in international wildlife rehabilitation, in 2022, there was a movie called All That Breathes. It was a documentary, and it was about two brothers in India who take care of injured birds of prey,
mm,
where most people will not deal with meat eaters, carnivores.
mm,
And now Delhi is a city of 30 million. I mean, this is and one of the most polluted places in the world. In 2022, this little movie by an Indian filmmaker came out called All That Breathes.
mm,
It's the first documentary in history to win both Sundance and Cannes. Then
mm,
it won 18 more film festivals and became an Academy Award finalist
mm,
for Best Documentary. It lost to Navalny, but it is a beautiful movie. It's beautiful and lyrical, and it encompasses more than wildlife rehab. It's
mm,
based on the birds, but it's just a wonderful movie.
mm,
Uh, on the 24th of October,
mm,
Pace University is going to be screening it. It's a free screening. And one of the brothers
mm.
will be here from India. He will do a Q&A after the movie is screened. His brother is in Delhi taking care of the birds, but he will be on Zoom. So if the audience asks questions, he will be on Zoom projected onto the screen so he can answer questions too. We've done a lot of those nights when the film was being released and campaigning. So the movie, it's always a fun night, and I invite you all to come. So that's all. I would be happy to answer some questions if you have any.
Thank you so much,
Uh,
Susie. What a fascinating presentation, incredible stories and concrete ways to help. That last story about the red tail was incredible. Thank you so
mm.
much. Does anyone, I'm going to look in the chat, but does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask just out loud? And if you do, now is the time to unmute yourself.
all right.
Mm, mm,
Yes, Lynn.
I saw that film and it was inspiring.
Oh, good.
And I also really, really enjoyed this presentation. I really admire people like yourself who put in all of this hard work to help wildlife. So I just want to say thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. We all appreciate it. It's it's very cool to be able to share at least a little space and time with these creatures before they go back out again.
I have one question. Short of taking the animals to a vet, and how what proportion of time do you do that, and how often can you yourself determine how to treat them or what to do?
Um, sometimes the injury is it's very obvious if they're cut, if they're bleeding, if a limb or a wing is obviously broken, something like that. Um, then you need a vet. Um, Sometimes if the animal, like if say a window strike, someone brings in a bird that's hit a window, he's still alive, he's unconscious. Sometimes they come to and they seem to be all right. You know, you want to watch them for a while, make sure they're all right. Uh, if they have been clipped by a car and you don't again see any visible things that you need to address through a vet. Sometimes birds get hit by cars and they're just incredibly bruised and they just don't want to move. And that's when we can help. We can just set them up and provide the space they need to heal.
Okay,
So
thank you. We have
yeah.
some comments in the chat. Alan says, thank you with two exclamation points. Carol Summerfield says, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. Very inspiring. Bidou says, thank you for everything you're doing to help birds and animals. It's a tough job. Just know we're rooting for you. Very true.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Um, If we don't have any more questions, I'm just going to mention that our chapter has a bird walk, a field trip coming up on Saturday at Marshlands and Edith Reed in Rye. Probably most of you have been there, but if you haven't, sign up right now. Those are must see and must bird locations, some of the most beautiful locations in our area. So I'd encourage you to sign up, and you can find more information about that bird walk and all of our upcoming field trips and future speaker programs on our website. Lynn, did you have another question?
I have another question. You said that at Pace they were going to be showing that film, and one of the two guys was going to be there, and you said something about watching it on Zoom. How
No.
do I do that?
Um, they actually, one of the brothers who is in Delhi, he's in Delhi right now. He will be on Zoom, so the people in the audience will be able to
Okay.
see him projected on the screen.
So I need to go to Pace.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
just wanted to
Yeah.
know.
Now it
Yeah.
sounds like a wonderful evening.
You know, if you wanted to see the one brother who is going to be here in person, um, he is also going to be speaking at the Cold Spring Library on the 26th, Saturday the 26th, without the movie. So just presenting what he and his brother do. And that's Butterfield Library from 11 to 12 on Saturday. So that's without the movie.
Awesome. Well, if we don't have
Yeah.
any more questions, thanks again so much. Wonderful presentation. We all learned so much. And I encourage you to seek out Suzie Gilbert's books and hope to see you all at future programs and on bird walks. Thanks for attending. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, Leslie.
Oh, you're so welcome. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye.
Mhm.